Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. In today's episode, my special guest is Dr. Sylvia Tara. As a biochemist, she is the author of The Secret Life of Fat. Today, Dr. Tara and I sat down and we spoke about lots of different topics, including why stubborn fat loss exists, who fat loss is more difficult for, the variables that we struggle with, the psychology of fat loss, and so much more. Guys, if you like today's podcast, make sure you subscribe, rate, review, share it with your friends, and enjoy this episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast featuring Dr. Sylvia Tara. Dr. Tara, where does this podcast find you?
Oh, I happen to be in Princeton, New Jersey today.
Oh, very nice. Are you from that area or?
I grew up around here, but I've been living in California for 20 years and going back soon. So I'm very happy. I love California.
Oh, that's, this time of year, I think I'd like to be in California also. I actually am down in South Florida here. So as you can see by the hanky that I'll periodically be wiping my brow with, it's a little warmer down here. Yeah. So, Dr. Tara, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, speak with this audience here. I think the message that you have been putting out and has been specifically taking hold over the last year to 2 years, as they say, it's like an overnight success that happens over 30 years or so. It's one in which I think a lot of people not only want to hear, but need to hear. So the book you published recently, The Secret Life of Fat, can you give me a little bit about what exactly that means and what our misconception of fat really is?
Yeah, so I think everyone thinks of fat as just a reserve of calories. It's just this excess blubber, and we should get rid of it by all means. But really, one of the most interesting things I learned about fat in my research was that fat is not just fat, right? Fat is actually an endocrine organ. So fat is doing things in your body that you probably had no idea it was doing. So not only is it storing some extra calories, it actually is producing hormones that your body depends on. So it's not unlike your adrenal gland or your thyroid gland, right? Or your pituitary gland that's producing hormones your body needs. Fat is also one of those glands. And I know it's so hard for people to get their head around that, but you can think of fat like skin, right? So like one piece of skin, a 1 inch piece of skin is just skin tissue, right? Just a piece of tissue. But skin in its totality functions like an organ, right? So it's considered our largest organ, but probably fat is actually our largest organ. And fat's very similar in that if you just take a piece of it, right, it's just a piece of fat tissue, but in its totality, how it functions in our body is actually like a hormone, or a hormonal gland, right, part of the endocrine system.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so where we've got it off, it seems, is that we thought fat is this benign kind of, okay, we need to get rid of this thing, but we have a finite amount of fat cells in general, right? We can't produce more fat cells. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
No, you can always produce more fat cells.
Okay, you can. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think one debate that's gone on is, can you reduce the number of fat cells? And
that's more what I was getting to.
And
go
there's
right
research
ahead.
showing that no, you can't. But I mean, it's hard for me to completely buy into that, to be honest. People go from 300 pounds to 150 pounds, and there's cell senescence, there's cell death, there's all kinds of things that go on. So I think that's more debated, whether you can lose fat cells or not.
Okay, but the fat within those cells is what we've been focusing on. Yeah. And it seems like we've taken maybe an inaccurate or an incomplete approach to this process, right? Completely.
I mean, losing weight is not just about emptying out your fat cells, right, and getting rid of that fat. It's a very intricate, a coordinated system between your fat and your hormones, your metabolism, your age, your genes, right? Even the bacteria in your body. There's so much more to losing weight or gaining weight than people think. I mean, interestingly, you can produce fat cells without eating much at all. And this happens actually in anorexia nervosa patients. When you get to a very low level of fat, stem cells, right? Those cells in your body that can either turn into muscle or bone or cartilage, they will automatically turn into fat because your body is desperate to create some fat if you don't have enough. And so, it's not how people get obese, obviously. But the point is that there's all kinds of ways that fat creation goes on in your body. It's not just about gluttony. And I think especially if you've had stubborn fat that's very hard to lose, you have to get more smart about fat. You have to understand how fat is created. It's different in different people. Genetics will weigh in differently. The age will weigh in, hormones will weigh in, and you have to understand all of it if you have very stubborn fat you're trying to lose.
Say more about those who are stubborn fat loss losers. You have those people who are working out, 5 to 8 hours per week. They're trying to be as diligent as they can. They're understanding the calories in, calories out. They might even be in substantial calorie deficits, but they're just not seeing the progress that they want. What are some of the key takeaways that this audience can take from you, Dr. Tara?
Yeah, this is fascinating. This is the reason I wrote the book, The Secret Life of Fat, because I'm one of those people, right? I'm one of those people that I gain weight easily. I lose it with great difficulty. I have to do a lot more work than others. And so, I'd been on diets since I was 12, right? Trying to lose weight, and I'd lose some weight. It would creep back. I'd lose it again. I could never lose weight as quickly as other people. It was always more of a struggle. I had to go for longer. I had to deprive myself more, work more at it to even lose a pound, really. And I got very tired of this, right? Especially after 2 kids, middle age. It's like, wow, it got even slower. And I thought, okay, something's wrong with me. all these great successes I'm supposed to have in dieting, all these things that dieting promises, they're not working for me. What is wrong? And so I'm a biochemist by training. And so I just took a lot of time to dig into all the scientific literature, right? Well, what is there to know about fat? I talked to a lot of scientists as well about their research, to find out more. And after about 5 years of this and looking at like 1,000 articles in scientific literature, it became just so interesting to learn about what fat is. So when we talk about fat as an endocrine organ that is releasing hormones, there's one particular hormone that fat makes, which is leptin, right? And so fat produces leptin, it releases into your blood system, right? Your blood supply. It circulates throughout your body. It binds in your hypothalamus in your brain. And in this way, fat actually controls your brain. So this is really interesting. It controls your thinking. When we have normal level of fat, sufficient level of fat, we haven't lost or, gained substantially, your body pretty much believes everything's all right in the world, right? There's enough nutrition. I don't have to worry. You're overall satiated. Of course, you get hungry before a meal, right? Or if you haven't eaten for a while, but your normal levels, you're pretty satiated. When we start to lose weight, when we start to lose fat, there's a delta. There's a decrease in the amount of leptin in our body. And your hypothalamus senses this. And it's thinking, my goodness, something's wrong, right? We're losing fat. Something's wrong in our environment. There's not enough food. And it turns your brain into a food-seeking machine, right? So now you're out there looking for food everywhere, right? You might be 100 pounds overweight, but if you've lost, say, 10% of your weight, you're in a food-seeking machine right now. Your brain thinks something's wrong in this environment and I have to look for food. Appetites are really big. People who've lost about 10% of their weight, they tend to be more excited by food. When they do fMRI images of their brain, they see this. So if you show them a picture of food, their excitatory centers of the brain light up wildly. What's also interesting is the inhibitory centers of the brain that are involved with self-control and self-restraint, they are diminished. So your brain is now turned into this thing that is seeking food with little self-control. All of this because of leptin, because your leptin levels have decreased. And also, your skeletal muscle binds with leptin. So we talked about leptin, right, going through your circulatory system, going to your brain. It also binds with your skeletal muscle. And when we have normal levels of leptin, we use certain muscle cells, right, that are less efficient at burning calories. So you'll burn more calories. When you start losing leptin, your muscle cells revert to a different type of protein, which is much more efficient at using energy. So we actually burn about 22% fewer calories when we have lost some weight because of that.
Oh, wow.
Right? So you have a huge appetite. You're seeking food all the time with little ability to control yourself, and you're burning fewer calories. Your body has this coordinated effort to put that weight back on. Our bodies don't like to lose weight. And if you've yo-yo dieted in the past, like I have, you really are in the prime of this problem, right? Because you have a big appetite, you have a slower metabolism. And the problem is that this effect can last for years, right? They've studied it for 6 years. For some people, it didn't go away in all those 6 years, right, that they were studying.
Oh, wow.
So if you pick a diet, I mean, think about it, you're going to be on this diet forever, right? It might not ever end for you. You'll have to eat a little bit less than people around you. And you'll be hungrier and you'll seek food for longer. And now this doesn't mean you can't lose weight. And I want to throw that out there right there, because I know this sounds like a very depressing situation. It kind of is, right? We're not all created equal. You have to persist, and you have to know what you're up for, and you have to find that diet that is going to work for you, right? For your lifestyle for the long run. And there are things that you can do. And I do write about that in the book as well, but I'll pause there for a second because I've been talking. No.
This is all unbelievable. And you should see the notes that I'm taking here. And I'm definitely going to have to listen back to this podcast, because obviously I use this for myself and those that I work with. And I know that you have a course that you are releasing, or if not have already released, we can get into in a little bit. But there's a few other things that I wanted to hit on about leptin in particular. And I remember the first time I heard leptin being spoke of was, I believe, by Robert Lustig out of UCal, speaking about it with, I think it was pediatric diabetes and obesity. And he was then like examining what leptin could do for kids, because again, at this point, if you think about it, like, okay, children shouldn't have these diabetic tendencies, and he was seeing that. What are your thoughts on his research, and how does that help us sitting here today?
Yeah, so I mean, Lustig does a lot of work on sugar, right? How
Yes.
bad sugar is, how quickly you convert it into calories and ultimately fat. And no doubt we get an abundance of sugar in our diets. It's very easy to do. Even if you're thinking you're avoiding sugar, right? If you eat at a restaurant, you get like what looks like ready-made chicken patties you can quickly put into a sandwich. They're loaded with sugar. There's hidden sugar all over the place. And so, of course, the more you have it, you get hyperinsulinism, right? You get too much insulin because your body, sugar provokes insulin in our body, right? Insulin is responsible for clearing our blood, our circulatory system of any extra nutrients, making sure it gets internalized into cells. Right. So you sort of become resistant. It's like loud music. The more you listen to loud music, it doesn't sound loud after a while. In fact, you need to turn it up even louder in order to think that it's loud. Right. So that's the kind of resistance you get. After a while, your body stops responding to insulin. There's just so much of it that it stops listening to it, if you will. And that can happen with leptin too, right? People can become desensitized to leptin as well.
That's exactly what I was about to ask. Go ahead. Say more.
Yeah. And so there are ways to deal with that. I think one thing that has come out is that fasting is actually quite good for this situation. I mean, there's all different ways to deal with it. One is there's those low insulin provoking diets like Atkins diet, which is all protein, or the keto diets, and those are effective. Some of them have a high recidivism rate. So people go on those diets, they can't stand it for that long. They're very restrictive. There's a lot of components to staying on them. You have to shop for certain foods, prepare foods. If you're the type of person that can do that for the long run, it's great. It's a way to not be hungry. It's a way to be able to eat and to not have the problems. But when I talk about picking a diet that works for you, make sure that can work for you, right? Because there's plenty of people who get really sick of that diet. They come off. And once you come off that diet, you can gain your weight back and more really, really fast. And so I've been on those before. I like them. They work, right? I'm not the behavioral type that can stay on that forever, right? I'm a little bit, I guess, rebellious. Sometimes I just want what I want and I don't want to deal with it. So the other way you can, work around this with that problem is fasting works quite well, right? So intermittent fasting I have found to just be a great way to bust through stubborn fat. And there's lots of reasons for that. It has so many cures for things. I mean, one is that it affects your willpower. So if you stop eating at a certain time of day until wait till the next day, people are less hungry the next day, right? Or some days after that, say maybe a week after that, your appetite goes down. You have more willpower overall because you're exercising it. And willpower is like a muscle. And I have a whole chapter about mind over fat and the psychology of losing weight. Right. But willpower is a part of that. And you have to exercise it. And it gets stronger with exercise. You have to give it breaks, too, just like a muscle. Right. You can't do it all the time. But that's another really important component. And it clears your bloodstream of any kind of nutrients or anything in there that your insulin system just take a rest, right? It doesn't have to come out anymore out of the pancreas. It can just rest. Your body then starts to hear it again, right? Because it's not around all the time. And so withdrawing it, right, your cells now, your receptors will upregulate a little bit as well. So that's a really good method. I also find with intermittent fasting, you don't have to be so strict about what you eat all the time. So if you like what I call a little more food latitude in my course, right? Like with Atkins, it's very narrow food latitude. You eat meat, you eat fat and nothing else, right? It's very, very narrow. Where there's diets that give you more food latitude. You have a wider selection of what you can eat. And I find with intermittent fasting, you can kind of eat more or less what you want. Like I wouldn't have a whole cream pie or anything like that, right? But you have more variety of what you can eat in the window you eat, as long as there's a window where you're not eating. You don't actually gain weight. So if you like to have more variety, that could be good for you. And also, if you can withstand a fast, some people can't do the fasting part. It just doesn't work for them. So again, there's lots of options we have as dieters, in this decade, which is great, but you have to find one you can stay on for forever, basically, that you can stay on for a long time.
So what I'm hearing here is that when choosing a diet, adherence and compliancy is one of the main things that you should be thinking about.
Absolutely. And the older you get, right, and the more you've yo-yo dieted, your weight loss is slower, right? So you have to be very patient with it. You can go for 2 months without losing a pound, right? I have people who write me about this. I've had the experience myself. Extraordinarily frustrating, right? You feel like you're doing everything and you weigh yourself every day and nothing's moving. We get set points, right, in our body. Our body likes to be a certain weight. And I think when you're younger, you can move those around faster. But when you're older, it really wants to stay. It does not want a lot of change right now. So you might plateau at this weight for a long time. It actually is going to break. It is going to decrease, right? Your body adapts to the environment around it. It wants to be sure you're really in the environment, the new environment that your body thinks it's in. And so it's going to hold out for a long time. It gets smarter, but it's now lived for a while. It's seen that there's been changes in the environment. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. Hey, I'm not going to react anymore, right? It's just like when you have kids, right? When they're young, like when you're a new parent, you react to everything. Oh my gosh, they dropped the toy. Oh my gosh. As they get older, you're like, yeah, whatever. They dropped their toy. Like you don't react as much. And in a way, our bodies are the same. As you get older, they're not going to react to everything. So it could last a long time. And so just be patient. And you'll have to work at it harder. You'll have to do things like restricting your eating window as well. You'll have to exercise more. So even though so much of what I'm saying, it sounds like so depressing and defeatist, oh God, I'll never lose weight. You can. You just have to understand what's going on in your body at any given situation you're in. If you're a 22-year-old male who has an extra 15 pounds, it's going to come off just like that. All you really have to do is cut out some processed foods and carbs, do a little exercise. It is going to come off you, right? If you're now a 55-year-old woman with say like 50 pounds to lose, you're in for a real battle. It's not going to move for maybe a month and a half if you're unlucky. And when it does move, it'll move very slowly. You'll be lucky if a couple pounds a month will come off, but it will actually come off. You just have to stay with it and stay on that diet for probably a year and a half.
Got it. Going back to the leptin as a hormone, obviously this is a complex dynamic system. How deep into the weeds in terms of hormones have you gotten in terms of the balance between leptin, ghrelin, and any other hormones that we encounter? Obviously, the big ones are insulin, and some people may know of leptin, but this has got to be an enormous biochemical metabolic system that has so many moving parts. Like, how deep are we at right now, and how much of an understanding do we have right now of the complexities of fat gain specifically?
Yeah, it's funny because fat has a stigma to it. Anytime someone has fat, people automatically default to you're out of control. You just can't control yourself, right? So whenever you talk about genetics and fat or hormones and fat, it's always met with this great deal of skepticism of you're making an excuse, right? And no matter what problem you have, I write about all these different patients, right, in the book who've had various problems and how they dealt with it, how they finally got on top of it, right? But sometimes there is a need for medical weight loss. You need something above and beyond, right? Just calories and exercise and things like that. So getting back to your question on hormones, they're hugely implicated in how hard or how easy it is for you to lose weight, enormously. And it's not just leptin. Leptin we talked about that has control on appetite, that has control of your satiation and on your metabolism as well. Fat releases another hormone called adiponectin, right? This is a really interesting one. So adiponectin is released from your fat cells, circulates in your blood, and what it does is different than leptin. It actually takes the triglycerides out of your blood, internalizes them, right? So it tells your body where to put this fat. And it's so interesting because, there's visceral fat and there's subcutaneous fat. And subcutaneous fat is the healthy place to store your fat. It's right under your skin, your arms, your legs, et cetera. If you're going to have some extra weight, that's where you want to put it. Then there's visceral fat underneath the stomach wall. Right. And that's the fat that's very dangerous. It gets inflamed, right? That's what leads to diabetes, can lead to heart disease, all those things. And people with good levels of adiponectin, they tend to put fat in their subcutaneous deposits and not in their visceral area. And I write about sumo wrestlers in the book because they're obviously obese, but surprisingly, they're metabolically healthy. They don't have heart disease. They don't have diabetes. They don't have an inflammatory disease. It's because they exercise for 6 hours a day, and exercise actually provokes fat cells, right, to release more adiponectin into your system. And so they eat like 6,000 calories a day. They're really heavy. All those nutrients are going into subcutaneous fat and not in visceral fat. So if you take a CT image of the midsection of a sumo wrestler, they don't have visceral fat, even though they're like 300 pounds overweight. So I find that to be fascinating. And that's another a hormone of fat.
So wait a second. If you have a person who's exercising consistently, is it the fact that they're having a excess of calories that is causing this as well? Because the adiponectin is obviously taking excess calories and needs to put it somewhere. So it's storing it as more of what you call subcutaneous fat. Is that a prerequisite for you to be storing fat? Because you would, it is.
No, insulin will help you store fat. Insulin will also take everything out of your blood and help your cells internalize those nutrients, right? So insulin also very much so will lead to fat gain. But adiponectin is more of a director. If you're going to, be putting fat somewhere, don't put it in the visceral area, right? So put it in your subcutaneous area instead, right? So it helps direct fat to where it needs to be, should be in your body, which is not in your heart, not in your liver, right? Not in your visceral area. Put it on your butt, put it on your legs, right? Put it somewhere that's away from everything. It helps sequester it away from any of those more vulnerable places.
Yeah. And what I start to think about is as a nutrition coach and fitness coach, how measuring body fat is incomplete unless you have an entire picture, something like a Dexa scan or something like that. Is that, what do you consider a gold standard in terms of determining someone's body fat, if you even care about it?
Yeah, no, it matters, right? So you can have some extra weight. So I know there's a lot of trainers who try to get people down to like 17 to 22% body fat. It doesn't have to be that low to be healthy, right? And it's hard to attain. So don't let the perfect get in the way of the possible, right? Is what I tell people, right? They don't have to have 6-pack abs. They don't have to be a bodybuilder. They just have to be healthy enough and happy, right? And you can have an extra 15 pounds and be healthy enough and happy. Fat is not a complete enemy. It's somewhat, right? If you're obese, it's an enemy. If you have a lot of visceral fat, it's an enemy, yes. But if there's like a little extra, you can actually be okay. Keep it out of your visceral area. But for measuring fat, I think the water submersion, right, aspect of doing that is probably the most complete way. It's not convenient.
Like a Bod Pod, as they say.
It's not at all convenient, but it's a good way to do it. Well, let's get back to hormones, because I didn't completely finish your answering your question. I mean, on top of that, there's growth hormone, right? That's a really good fat burner, right? And then there's testosterone, which is this is why men lose weight much, much faster than women, is testosterone. In fact, if you give women testosterone injections, this fat melts right off of them. And some women do this, right? Some bodybuilder women, some normal women who've got stubborn fat, they'll do some testosterone shots. And I read about transsexuals also, people who are transitioning. It's very interesting when men turn into women, they gain weight rapidly with all the estrogen and testosterone blockers they take. So it definitely has an impact on weight. Now, as we age, we have less of those hormones around. So your growth hormone declines, your thyroid hormones decline as well. That's another one that helps you lose weight. Testosterone.
was just about to ask that, Dr. Tara, can you, because obviously hunger obviously is regulated a bit by leptin and ghrelin and those types of hormones, but is it just as simple as saying, obviously there's that willpower component to it. I'm just going to abstain from eating and just suffer. But obviously the way I see it is like, if there's a message that's going off, there's a reason for that message, and we can just ignore the fire alarm going off, or we can start to understand why the fire alarm is going off and maybe shut that off in the first place. Have you started to uncover some of the reasons why that fire alarm is going off, or is that just the way it is? It's a genetic thing, or is this something maybe regulated by either lifestyle or diet?
You talk about hunger as that fire alarm?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, isn't it? Wouldn't it be great if we just had control of hunger all the time? It's not that.
But I mean, we can all imagine the times that we are more hungry.
Yeah.
When we don't get sleep, we're more hungry, especially cravings for sugar. Yeah. When we are stressed, we want more, we want to eat more. And a lot of this obviously is what is going to cause a stress reduction or a release in dopamine, obviously. But then also at certain times of our lives, we're more hungry than others. If you ask anybody, any woman who is menstruating, if they're craving chocolate, you're going to get a response of, yes, I am. So this is a complex system that I think is just more than just willpower, right?
Yeah. I mean, willpower can help you fight it, but it exists on its own, right? So you got all this right. And I write about all of this in the book, by the way. So my incentive for the book were all the problems I ever had in my life. I wanted an answer to. So when you talk about the menstrual cycle,
you wrote the book for yourself then.
No, I needed an answer for all these. My husband stays thin all the time. Like he still fits into his college. He eats what he wants and fits into his jeans from college. Doesn't have any of these problems. I had to understand the difference between men and women. Why is that so? I had to understand like why we get hungry at certain times of the month and pregnancy and all these other things. And so I got all these answers, honestly, when I think about it, they're in the book. So let me try to answer them in this interview as much as I can. So you're completely right. People who are sleep deprived, they tend to have lower leptin levels, right? That's a big deal. And they crave more high energy foods like sugars and carbs. They'll really want that. So people who do night shift work, they're at a real disadvantage because they're often sleep deprived and there's like circadian rhythms. And so that's one thing that will make us hungrier, that if you can get enough sleep, you're less hungry when you get enough sleep. The other thing that sleeping does is growth hormone levels that we have, they peak at night. And so if you can sleep, for that full cycle, you get a lot of growth hormone, right? More, much better kind of circulation of it. The other thing to know is that when you eat, you start to mitigate your levels of growth hormone. So if you eat a really early breakfast or you eat late at night, your growth hormone now doesn't have that long window, right? When your body's empty, that can have its effect. So this is another reason why intermittent fasting is good, right? Stop eating at 6, don't eat again until 10 the next morning. Let it do its job, right? Growth hormone, let it come out, let it peak at night, sleep a full night, and let it go ahead and bust out some of that fat. The other things we talked about, ghrelin, you've mentioned a couple times. It's interesting. Now, this is a hormone that it's not from fat, it's from your stomach, actually, right? It gets released into your body and it makes you hungry. Exercise causes a big upsurge in ghrelin. So you have to be careful with exercise. As people always see diet and exercise. The truth is, get your diet under control first, build some really rock solid habits, and then start to work in exercise. If you exercise too quickly when you're changing your lifestyle, you're going to get a real provocation, right, of hunger coming at you. And women are much more sensitive to this than men, right? So there's some interesting experiments that I've written about where when you do a really strong bout of exercise, like you're busting through 500 or 600 calories, our ghrelin levels increase for sure, right? And everyone's hungry after that, they want to eat. For women, they produce 33% more ghrelin than men, okay? Their ghrelin levels are higher. So they tend to overcompensate more after exercise. So you have to really watch it. So there's a couple things you can do. One is ramp your exercise up slowly. When you start to get a big hunger reaction, stop, ratchet back a little bit, right? This is how you lose weight. This is why you have to be so smart about losing weight, because there's so many components. The other thing you can do, ratchet it back, just eat a little bit and just wait. It'll actually go down, right? If you can withstand it, it'll go down. And if you have that urge to eat a ton after you exercise, leafy greens, raw leafy greens are great. A lot of fiber, right? Things that are going to pass through your system and not pack onto your body. So, and also when you fill up like that, stretch out your belly, you stretch out stretch receptors. We actually have stretch receptors in our stomach, right? So they start to signal, wow, I'm full, I'm full. You feel really full, you're satiated, but you haven't put on 2,000 calories, right? You've probably, hopefully only put on 500 with a bunch of leafy greens. So there's things you can do, between ratcheting down the exercise a little bit and just being careful about what you eat, and then just give it a break. Go distract yourself. Distraction is actually a very good method in dieting, to do something else. And there's a whole chapter 3, right? There's a whole section. The menstrual cycle. I have so much to talk about. I can go on for hours and pause in between here, but I write about this. There's certain times of the month where we actually pack on more fat as women. So we get hungrier, but even our biochemistry changes. We actually pack more fat on, like right before our period or so. And so we have like a pound or 2 shift every month that'll go on for that reason. Mm-hmm. And pregnancy is another one. Usually around the second trimester, our microbiome changes, right? Our bacterial distribution changes. And we actually extract more calories from food during certain times of pregnancy. It's very interesting. And it normalizes towards the end, but I'll tell you, it is so complicated.
So Dr. Tara, we've got genetics. We've got the food that we're eating. We've got stressors and lifestyle factors. We've got now multiple hormones. We've got now microbiome. How are we ever going to figure this thing out? And I know this might tie in a little bit to the coursework that you're now offering. I mean, talk me off the ledge here.
So these are things that have gone on our whole existence. We just didn't know about it, right? So like the things that we've been doing, right? We fight fat. Some people have a hard time. Some people it's easy. Like this has all existed forever. I'm just writing about it now and bringing it to the surface. So this is actually nothing new. It's been happening our whole, the human existence. So no matter what you have, right? And I write about all these patients for each chapter in the book. So there's a chapter on genetics, chapter on age, chapter on gender. And obesogens, we haven't talked about that. There's certain things in our environment like pesticides that can, mimic estrogens and make us fat as well. I mean, that's a whole nother thing. But no matter what,
I didn't have enough fingers there, Dr. Tara.
No matter what it is, you can still lose weight. It's just going to be harder, and you have to be more patient. That's what it really comes down to. And so there are certain things you could do for each one of those areas we talked about, right? Whether it's genetics, whether it's microbiome, whether it's age, I have like solutions for each one. And this is what the course goes into a little deeper. So when I was really writing like through stories of patients, through stories of doctors. I wanted it to be very readable and understandable for people. But the course goes into more detail of what do I do now? How do I deal with this? And there are strategies that cut across no matter what your problem is, right? If you have age, if you have bacteria, you can even get viruses that make you fat. It can be contagious, right, to have fatness. No matter what, there's strategies that cut across all these different problems. So number one is recognize, are you someone with stubborn fat? If you've been driven to read my book, you are, because you've tried a bunch of things and you're still searching for an answer, right? If you lose weight really quickly, you probably have no reason to buy any book, right? So but if you have stubborn fat, that's the first thing. Why is your fat stubborn? It could be a number of things. It could be age, it could be your microbiome, it could be your genetics, it could be a whole bunch of things. Okay, now what do you do about it? So the strategies that cut across tend to be, there's obvious things. Number one, right? Get rid of your sugars and processed foods. This is what Lustig talks about. It's what a whole bunch of people talk about, right? Get rid of all of that. Try to cook for yourself as much as possible. There are amazing amounts of hidden sugars in everything, in toothpaste, right? In tomato sauce, things that you think you're being healthy, you don't even know what's in it. And it's very easy to cook for yourself. You just have to cook up some meat, right? Cook up some whole grain and you can make it taste good. I guess the next thing I should do is a cookbook. So that's one, right? Cut out sugars, cut out your carbohydrates, cut out anything hidden like that. The next thing you should start to really look at is increase your amount of fiber and leafy greens. All right. So I write about the microbiome. I have a whole chapter on the microbiome, which is bacteria and viruses in our body. So when you eat energy-dense foods, like high-processed foods, right, you tend to have a bacterial distribution that's very good at extracting calories from food, right? It's just a different type of bacteria distribution you'll have. If you eat a high diversity of fruits and vegetables, right, especially raw, you get a different type of microbiome your body will grow. And it's a type of microbiome that lets a lot of food pass. It doesn't extract all the calories out of your food, right? So in a way, fat loss begets fat loss. if you're eating a lot of cookies and cakes, not only are you getting a lot of calories, right, but you're also getting a microbiome that's very good at extracting every calorie out of there. Now, if you eat more fruits and vegetables and fibrous foods, not only are you getting fewer calories, but you're also growing a microbiome that lets a lot of it pass through. It's not absorbing it all, right? And you're getting less sugars that it's creating and all of those things. And so have a giant salad for lunch every day. That's kind of, if you want to go to cut to the chase, the net, right? So cut out a lot of processed stuff, have a light breakfast, and then leafy greens as much as possible. Let that be your main meal. Have a piece of whole wheat bread with it or something like that, because actually you can use insulin to your own advantage. So I know a lot of diets are about don't provoke insulin, not even one little bit, right? You won't gain weight. So this is a little bit of a different advice, is that insulin is actually very satiating. All right. So just like leptin causes satiation, it makes us feel pretty much overall satisfied and healthy and happy. So does insulin. Insulin also reaches those satiation parts of the brain. So if you have no insulin, a lot of people find they're hungry. They're just always looking for food, right? Because our money is really low on insulin-provoking diets. I've used insulin provocation very strategically. So after the salad, I'll have like a piece of whole wheat bread, sometimes with some jam on it. I'll even go as far as having like a few gummy bears or something. I'm not looking for food or thinking about it for 6 hours after that. If I don't have a little bit of whole wheat bread or a little bit of grain, I find I'm constantly looking. Even though I don't feel hungry, I'm constantly looking for food.
So a little dessert after your lunch, just a little touch, a little cookie.
Don't go crazy, right?
Just a little Oreo, right? Not even double stuffed.
If even. So just, so there's a different type of dieter who goes berserk at sugar, right? And it's a certain type.
Yeah.
If you're one of them, don't do this at all. This is not for you.
Yeah.
Right? That's like the diet that works for you. If you're someone who can't handle sugar, absolutely do not do what I'm saying. But if not, I have found it to be very, very useful. And people lambaste me for this because now dieting is so dogmatic. There's like different camps and they fight all over it. And anyone who doesn't believe them is an idiot, right? So I have been at times lambasted. I know lots of people who do this. It works incredibly well. The other part of it for stubborn fat is widen that fasting window. Okay, the more stubborn your fat is, the wider you really should make it. So I know if I'm really trying to lose weight, I gotta have to do something like an 18-hour fast every day, right? It's a long time. And I only learned that through logging. So this is another thing I advise, and people who contact me about is keep a log of everything you eat. So there's all this research coming out now out of Weizmann Institute is one of the first to pioneer it. Food doesn't affect everyone the same way. So there are people who can eat a muffin and they get no increase in their blood sugar levels. It stays the same. And there's people who have just a bite of a muffin and they have a huge blood sugar spike. So we're not all reacting.
Or even smelling or thinking about a muffin.
Like it. Yeah. So keep a log of what you're eating for breakfast, for lunch. What time are you eating? How much are you eating? What was the calorie content? What is it you did eat? You'll start to see what you can get away with and what you can't. So stubborn fat, I'd say just a few hundred calories for breakfast, right? Something balanced, some protein, a little bit of carb, big leafy green for lunch rather. Take a little bit of toast or something with it, right? So that it really hits your satiation areas of your brain. Maybe have something around 3 or 4 o'clock, very light and low sugar. Don't eat again until the next day. If you can stand that, right? And for a long period of time, I have found that to be one of the things that works the best for really stubborn fat.
Now, isn't it one of those cases that as soon as you revert back to something similar that you've done before, or you're going to put that weight back on, is there a way to kind of reset things? Because we talked about set point earlier, and I'd love to hear your perspective on the idea of calories in, calories out as well.
Yeah, I mean, so we do have set points, but I know there's a lot of debate over this, and some people say they never change for your whole life. You just have one set point and you have to be that way. I have found that to be completely not true. Right. So if you stay at a new weight for long enough, guess what? That becomes your set point. And I've experienced this because after I lost weight, my body didn't want to gain weight either. Right. So like, Christmas time comes around or whatever, where I indulge here or there, and it didn't want to gain weight. It wanted to stay where it was. That's the upside of a set point. Right. So I don't think you have to be at any permanent weight forever. It takes a long time to reset that set point, but it can happen. Calories in, calories out. I actually think calories do matter, right? But where they're coming from matters a lot as well, right? And I'm sure this is obvious to all of your listeners. So if you have 100 calories in Oreos versus 100 calories in a salad, of course that matters, right? Where they're coming from, because that's just the start. What we eat, that is just the start of the hormonal cascade we are starting in our body, right? So it's like the instigator of what happens next. And if you're having something that's very high sugar, boy, you're doing a whole bunch of things. You're changing your microbiome if you do that a lot, right? You're starting to get bacteria that are going to extract a lot of calories out of your food. Also, you're releasing insulin, which is going to help clear it out of your bloodstream really quickly and put it into your tissues. And then you're hungry again, right? 10 minutes later, right? Now, if you have that leafy green salad instead, you're doing something different. It's going in, right? You're going to start growing bacteria that's like, it's just fiber, let it pass. We don't need it, right? So more is going to go out. And then also you're not getting a huge, insulin bolus that's clearing it out right away. And it takes a long time to work through your gut. So you're staying full for longer. So like the 100 calories you're getting, obviously it matters where you're getting it from. I find that calories don't matter only if you're on a very low insulin provoking diet. So if you're on Atkins or something like that, yeah, you can eat a lot of calories and get away with it. I guess the question for the dieter is, can you stay on that for a really long time? Is it healthy? Do you get your cholesterol checked, get all your vitals checked, and can you stay on it? It's very restrictive, and that's where people go off. And once you go off a diet like that, they gain rapidly, right? And I've known so many people who gain back by far more than they ever lost. And so it's just a watch out on those kind of diets.
Obviously, there's a bunch of variables when it comes to that in terms of people rapidly regaining weight. But have you been able to decipher what those variables are about those individuals who, as soon as they start kind of deviating off that diet, boom, everything comes back on?
So, if you're on a diet that's not provoking insulin at all, right? I'm very, very little of it. You don't have a lot. So then when you start, your body's tuned to react to very small levels of insulin, right? And so when you start having things that provoke insulin, it's like, man, there's this massive tidal wave of insulin, and your body reacts to like storing everything away now because it's very sensitive to insulin, even more than before. Right. So then that weight packs on really quickly. And it's discouraging. There's a whole psychological component to dieting. If you've gained more back than you lost, you feel like throwing in the towel. You're like, what was all that for? Now look, I'll never get this off. Right. So then it starts to become defeatist. So we have to kind of nurture our mind and our psychology about as much as we think about the body and calories and exercise and all that. The mental component's a big part of dieting too.
Now, is that something that you cover in the course that you've been doing?
I have a whole chapter. It's called Mind Over Fat. It's all about, the mental state. So in a way, you have to be ready to start on this journey because it's not an easy one. And there's so many diets out there. And sometimes I really just get frustrated. It's like, lose 20 pounds in 20 days, or this is so easy. Just buy my book or buy my planner. Right? It's not easy, especially if you have stubborn fat. Like, don't be suckered by that because it can be very defeating if you thought you were going to lose 20 pounds in 20 days and, you lost 1. And depending on where you are, again, right, if you're a younger male versus an older female, you're not going to have that response. So there's not one diet that fits all. And the older you are and the more stubborn your fat is, right, due to genetics or microbiome or whatever your issue is, it takes a really long time. So understand your body, number one. And then when you do go on this journey, like, it takes a lot out of you. Everything has to be right. And so at times of stress, people tend to break easier, right? They don't stay on plans as well. I think candy sales are correlated to times of hardship, right? Like the depression or like a job loss or divorce, and probably even COVID. A lot of people gain weight with COVID, right? It's just a time of stress. And we don't do as well at adhering to a long-term plan. We break easier. So pick the right time in your life to start a diet, right? If you are going through a new job or divorce or whatever, the situation might be, get in, wait, just wait. I know that sounds weird. But the thing is, you don't want to start a diet, fail, start again, fail. You start to set up this cycle in your mind, this kind of pattern of, I'm just going to fail, right? Because you've had so many experiences where it was very hard to stay on. So I'd say wait for the time to be right and then go on the journey. And then also, a lot of it has to do with self-control. And sometimes people really just cringe when I say that, because it's a very kind of old hat way of, old-timey way of thinking about it. But really, I mean, even if you're going to do keto, or you're going to do a diet that is full of eating cake and you only eat cake, even that diet takes self-control to stay on, right? Because you have to eat certain things, you're going to say no to certain things, right? And that takes a level of control to stay on. So we do have self-control muscles. And there's a lot of experiments around there about how do you enhance them? How do you weaken them? What makes them break? So one thing is repetition, right? Will certainly enhance self-control muscles. So how do you get into repeating a certain behavior all the time so that you don't even have to think about it anymore? There's experiments where people go to the gym and they're allowed to have this really kind of juicy, salacious audio novel or something like that, but they can only have it when they're on the treadmill, and otherwise they can't. And then they compare it to the other arm of people who don't have any incentive to go to the gym. And so what they notice is that the people who have the audio novel, even when they take it away, they go to the gym regularly, right? It's become a habit now. So this is called temptation bundling, where you take something you don't want to do and you pair it with something you really like, and you use that to create a habit. Now habits and willpower can break if you overuse it, just like if you overuse a muscle, right? So they notice like the habit of washing your hands all the time. So in a hospital, they always want doctors to wash their hands all the time. And as doctors start to get tired, right, and depleted during the course of the day, they don't want to wash their hands anymore. They stop doing it. But if they engineer in breaks, right, long enough breaks, right, either between shifts or throughout the day, they'll continue to wash their hands. I thought that was fascinating, right? Because that tells you actually have to take a break from your diet once in a while, right? Because if you're always on it and it's creating some level of stress, you need a break, right? So one thing is make it a habit so that it's not stressful. You just automatically do it all the time, right? You're not even thinking about it so much, just like those people going to the gym. And the second part is, if it starts to become like, this is a drag and I don't want to do it, take a break, but only in the capacity you can. The other thing to watch out for is that coming off your diet can be a slippery slope. There's something called dichotomous thinking. And this is when people, if I didn't win, I failed. If I didn't do perfectly today, then I'm a failure and there's no point in even trying again tomorrow. I might as well binge for like the next 2 weeks. There's actually, it sounds far-fetched and I'm exaggerating a little bit. I think you understand what I mean. If you're the type that is susceptible to dichotomous thinking like that, then just be very careful how you take your break, right? You might not want to binge, don't have pizza, don't have ice cream, maybe go shop instead. Shop for the thing you wanted to buy for a long time, but give yourself some break. You have to kind of love yourself to be on a diet, if you know what I mean. If you're constantly whipping yourself, you're not going to do well. You're going to come off and slide down a slope.
Dr. Tara, I've been playing around with the idea as I work with some of the clients that are specifically nutrition clients of, I messed up, I slipped up, and, I had that cheesecake from Cheesecake Factory. And I often ask them, what preceded that, right? What feeling, sensation, was there a moment? And they often go, I was in an argument with somebody at work and I just felt, you know what? I want that. Is this something that's more common than not for individuals, especially when they kind of quote unquote fall off the rails?
Oh my gosh, you've now become my 10th data point of someone telling me that. I interviewed a lot of weight coaches for the book as well. So some of the medical weight loss folks too at Mayo and at Tufts, right, and Joslin Diabetes Center, and some people I knew, coaches I knew, they all say this. And now you've said it too, so you're even more corroboration. Women have a more emotional interaction with food, let's say, right? So when they come off the rails, like when they cheat on their diet or eat something they weren't supposed to eat, they have a lot of guilt that's accompanied with that, right? And they have a much more predilection to become dichotomous thinkers, right? So it's like, as far as the world of dichotomous thinking, it's predominantly women, where if I wasn't perfect, I failed. So there's like a very black or whiteness about it. And so what I've heard from my coaches, I'm interested to hear what you do as well, is that they have more time, more energy spent bringing women back on. Like, it's okay that you had ice cream. It's not the end of the world. You don't want to, undo all the success you've had so far just because of that. It's forgiveness, right? There's something about self-forgiveness that has to happen there to get back on. And that's one of the biggest values that I've heard, the coaches can provide for people. Because without that, they tend to just stay off the diet and they think there's no use anymore. But the coach helps bring them on and brings them back, like a kind of authoritative forgiveness, if you will, right, from your coach.
I command you to forgive yourself.
Just like if someone in a place of authority saying it's okay, you're not a failure, get back on now. And so I find that to be interesting. So what have you done in those cases? So it's good, first of all, that you've diagnosed what precedes that, because it's almost like that level of frustration, or I'm so pissed now, I just don't feel like compromising anymore, right? I'm going to have what I want to have. And then what do you do to help them get back on?
That's a great question. So for me personally, what I've been doing recently is a normal person, quote unquote, whatever that means, right, would have a piece of cake and they would move on with their life. It's almost like their identity is someone that needs to beat themselves up about having a piece of cake, right? So for me personally, what I've been working more on is addressing the false beliefs of that individual that they have and actually going after that. And the symptom is I overeat or I eat junk when I'm stressed or whatever that is, because almost 100%, I would say 95% of nutrition clients that I've worked with in the past, I can sit down with them and I can go, can you write me a healthy meal plan? And they go, no way I can. I don't know what to eat. And I go, okay, what should I have in a good meal? I don't know, some salad, maybe like a piece of grilled chicken and maybe some whatever. And I'm like, okay, that was pretty good, right? And I did that. And you could do that times 3, right? So you know how to eat healthy. But for me, as I get into this more and more, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this in particular, is that it's an identification. People almost feel like who I am in this world is the person who needs to lose weight. And if I lose the weight, then who am I?
Wow, that is profound. That is interesting. Have you had success at moving people to a new identity of themselves?
Some are it's a willingness to be there. And those are the people who, like you're talking about, are the stubborn weight loss people. If you're picking up this book, there's a reason why you're picking up this book, because all the shit hasn't worked. And I would love to hear your perspective on how there is a psychological connection to what our biology is, right? Because if your brain thinks you are an overweight person, it almost seems like your biology is going to follow that. What is your perspective on that?
That's so interesting. I just probably to that because subconsciously you're being the person you think you're supposed to be, right? And in fact, I wonder if you took away mirrors and you gave people like a healthier food and they lost weight and didn't know it. Like would they like more automatically go to the other person, like the thinner person, because
that's
have weight.
It's a great point. Your only prescription is to take away mirrors, then go ahead and eat.
But the foods are so heavy if they're not. Does that work even better? That's really interesting. And I think it gets down to, I don't know, there's it's so packed with information on this one. But there's interesting, I'm going to bring up research again. So there's something called the National Weight Loss Registry, right? Where they study people who've lost a lot of weight and taken it off. And what did it take for them to get there? How did they keep it off for so long? And what they find sometimes are people like that, like they've got a certain identity. What finally changed their mind was a shock. There was something shocking that happened. Yeah. They got a diagnosis that, they have heart disease and they're going to die or something like that. Or they saw a picture of themselves and they look completely different, much heavier than they thought they were. And they're so shocked. So there's something around the shock of that's not who I want to be.
Or it's a shock to the ego going, wait a second, who I've built up isn't actually what's in the world. And now I'm coming to the oh shit moment of going, wait a second, the reality that I've created in my mind isn't the reality in front of me. I mean, think about, because I know obviously stubborn fat loss is a huge part in especially the female community. But men suffer from body dysmorphia as well. There's those men who can put on 30 pounds of muscle. They look at themselves in the mirror and they go, I'm still the skinny kid that got beat up on the playground. And I have clients that are like that. And they are Adonises relative to the other people that they're around. And when asked, they go, I always feel like I'm skinny and I always feel like that little punk. And I think, the marriage between these two worlds is when a person goes through the process of checking all the hierarchical boxes that you've laid out in the course, and then potentially going to that next level of like, wait a second, maybe there might be a little bit more to what you think on either a conscious or an unconscious level.
Yeah. Here. That's great. The other thing that, I wonder if they're afraid of losing the goal of being this thing they're trying to be. Because now we need a reason to live all the time and a goal. Yeah. So if you actually reach your ideal body type, you've lost your goal. It's like losing religion or something. It's like I always use that as North Star, and I don't have it. What do I do? So it's almost a reckoning of what's the next thing you want to do in life now that you don't have to do that part anymore.
And when you ask people if you had a magic wand and do that, they'd be like, and you did that, what would you think? What's your first reaction? They go, I don't know, I'm a little scared about that. So you're scared to get the lottery ticket. So your brain goes, oh, we want to do this thing. But your body goes, no way, I don't want to die, because I literally, this part of me will have to die in order for me to become a new person. And that, I think in a lot of ways, is where self-sabotage comes in, and where a lot of the resistance of adherence to diets come from as well. But I think it's just a fascinating topic there, Dr. Tara. And I really do appreciate the fact that you're experiencing these things as well, because it kind of validates my world as well.
Yeah, and that's a whole fascinating topic. I think that's the next revolution in weight loss. I think we've done a lot at understanding biochemistry and insulin and all these things. The psychological part is the next revolution.
Dr. Tara, I think we might have to collaborate on your next book or our next book then. But if those who are listening to this, whether they're coaches or individuals who are looking to get rid of stubborn fat, how can they get into this? This course is available now. Is it on the website, Secret of Stubborn Fat? Is that the one? SecretLifeOfFat.com. Secret Life
of
Fat.
www.thesecretLifeOfFat.com. You can find the course.
Yep.
The book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all over the place. You can reach me I'm on Facebook, so at Sylvia Tara, PhD. You'll find me there. People reach out that way. So yeah, there's lots of ways to get involved. And I post articles and tidbits here and there too on Facebook. So go on and like it, and then you can get the stream.
Excellent. One last question before you go, and this is something that I try to get a little bit out of for the individuals that I talk to on the podcast. Any advice to your 25-year-old version of yourself, or 25-year-olds, to kind of words of wisdom, whether it's career-wise or something like this, where they might be on their own journey of self betterment.
Yeah. I mean, the best thing we can do really is never let a problem get too big. Once it's really big, it's very hard to undo, and it's very hard to get back to the place you were in. All right, and this certainly has application in weight loss, right? So people who have gained weight and had to lose weight, they're in a whole different situation now, where it's very hard to stay at that new weight because of leptin, because of the caloric penalty we talked about. So then that goes for anything. If there's a drinking problem, a gambling problem, anything, don't let it get really big. You start to sense it. Don't be afraid to confront it very early on and nip it, right? And invest in nipping it. It's not easy, right? It might cost you money. It might take time or whatever. Just don't let the problems get too big.
Dr. Sylvia Tara, phoning in from Princeton, New Jersey. Thank you so much for your time, and stay safe.
Thank you so much. Nice talking to you.
Thanks again to Dr. Tara for coming on to today's podcast. If you are interested in her book or joining her course, head to the website www.thesecretlifeoffat.com, where you can sign up and purchase the book there or on Amazon.com. If you like today's podcast, make sure you subscribe, rate, review, share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast.